Hello, Canyon View cell groups. Here we go again with the 8th group video in our Daniel series. As usual, we will talk for a few minutes about Daniel chapter 8, and then we'll have 3 questions we want you to answer as a group. Our hope is that this will inspire great, focused conversations in all our cell groups, which will help us as we learn about Jesus and what it means to be a disciple. All right, let's get into Daniel chapter 8. This is a repeat of the visions that Daniel had in chapter 2 and 7 with some important distinctions. At the time the Bible was written, the way that a speaker or writer would add emphasis to his point was to repeat a word or phrase. We see that in John chapter 3, when Jesus said, "Verily, verily, I say unto you." So by repeating the words verily, he is saying, this is important. Listen up. So by God giving similar visions to Daniel on 3 different occasions, he is saying, listen up. This is very important. Think maybe we should do the same? Yeah, I think so too. Let's talk a little about parallel passages. A parallel passage can have reference to 2 or more points in time or circumstances and events. It's like when you see a distant mountain range. It's only when you get closer you realize that there are lower hills and valleys that are separate from the taller peaks you only see from a distance. A good example is if you drive south from Grand Junction toward Delta and Montrose, when you crest the little hill south of Orchard Mesa, you can see the San Juan Range highlighted by the 14,000-foot Mount Sneffels. But Mount Sneffels is over 100 miles away. What you can't make out are the little hills around Ridgeway and the lower mountains around Ouray that aren't so far in the distance. So let's get started with Daniel 8. Now remember, this last half of the book of Daniel is prophetic writing and has to be read and interpreted through that lens. Prophetic writing can be a little hard to follow, but I think we'll be able to navigate it together. So here we go. As we have seen in the first 2 visions, the ram in verse 3 refers to the dual kingdoms of the Medes and Persians. The goat in verse 5 refers to Alexander the Great. The death of Alexander is referenced in verse 8 as the large horn that was broken, and 4 less prominent horns took its place. These are the 4 lieutenants that had served under Alexander and eventually took its reign. Now, verse 9 refers to a horn which grew out of one of the original 4. This apparently refers to Antiochus Epiphanes, who was one of the lieutenants who took over the kingdom of the Seleucids by deceit. Note that there is a similar parallel passage in Revelation 13, when a horn is representative of the Antichrist. At the height of his power, Antiochus made a determined effort to destroy the Jewish faith. This is the reference to the beautiful land and the trampling down of the starry host in verse 9. Antiochus put an end to the daily sacrifices that were part of the Jewish faith since the time of Moses. So verse 12 is important. It refers to rebellion among the people as the cause of all the destruction that Antiochus was to bring about. God hates rebellion and has let the forces of Satan trample and kill the Jewish people because of their rebellion. Now, there are 2 angels speaking in verses 13, and 14. They are talking about the length of time from the desecration of the temple until the time it is reconstructed again. The 2,300 sacrifices, morning and evening, probably represents the 1,150-day period between when Antiochus began his bloody reign until the time the temple was reconstructed by Judas Maccabees in 165 BC. The rededication of the temple was the beginning of the celebration of Hanukkah that Jews practice still today. Verse 19 refers to the time of wrath at the end of time. This is God's wrath, and not to be confused with the time of the tribulation that Jesus described in Matthew 24. The Daniel 19 verse may have a partial parallel to the destruction of Jerusalem by Rome in AD 70. And it might also refer to the final battle between the forces of Satan and the forces of God as described in Revelation 19. Verses 19 through 25 of Daniel refer to a time of tremendous destruction. The first few verses could refer to Antiochus, but the last definitely refer to the end times as described in Revelation 16. He had just received a vision that transcended multiple centuries and involved supernatural forces of good and evil. So how are we to understand all this? Sometimes the Bible's descriptions of visions God has given to his prophets can be confusing. But why is that? One reason might be that visions are more powerful and longer lasting than the recorded speech of a prophet. Remember, the vision has been repeated 3 times. So God is saying this is important. You might reasonably ask, why is this so important? The reason is so that we can be prepared for whenever the end times come. Might be in our lifetime, might not. But by having the foreknowledge of what is going to take place, we can prepare ourselves and our families to press into Jesus. It's like the parable of the 10 virgins in Matthew 25. 5 were prepared with extra oil and 5 were not. And when the bridegroom came, the 5 who were ready went to meet him. The 5 who were not prepared were excluded. So with all that in mind, let's dive into this week's questions. As we do in every video, I'll ask the question and then give you an opportunity to pause the video with the question on screen and take as much time as you all need to discuss. And when you're ready, hit play and move on to the next one. Okay? Here we go. This week's first question is, Antiochus IV Epiphanes called himself God Manifest, the meaning of Epiphanes. The Jews called him Epimanes, which means the madman, which tells us they knew he was not really God. So what are ways that you have allowed false gods to be set up in the temples of your hearts? Feel free to push pause. Okay, second question. Hearing the cunning antics of the Antichrist foretold, what should a wise follower of Jesus be watchful of? Feel free to push pause. And this week's final question. What does hearing that the Prince of Princes will be destroyed, but not by human hands, in Daniel 8:25, do for your faith? In other words, if you are a follower of Christ, we can know we're on the winning team. Please press pause. Hey, great job, guys. I hope you all had a great time together, hanging out, getting to know each other, and supporting each other, and also continuing our discussion through the book of Daniel. I'm so looking forward to hearing all the great stories of life change and God showing up that are being made right now in cell groups across our city. Have fun and see you all next time.